Now let's look at profile settings. In order to access profiles, again you need to go to setup. So I am back into the CRM account of the super administrator. So I'm going into setup under users and control, click security control and access profiles. So as I mentioned earlier, Zoho CRM offers you two profiles by default, out of the box. And these are the administrator profile and the standard profile. The administrator profile comes with all CRM permissions enabled by default, and the standard profile comes with certain limited permissions enabled. Now, for any user that you invite into your CRM account, if they can perform all setup operations, then you would map them to the administrator profile. Or if you think they can only perform some limited set of operations, then you simply map them to the standard profile. Now, definitely there will be some scenarios in your organization where neither the admin profile nor the standard profile will suit a set of your users. In such cases, what you would do is simply clone from the admin or standard profile and make changes to a third profile, save it, and then associate it with those set of users, just like how I have done for sales managers. So this is a custom made profile which is different from admin or the standard profile. Here I have enabled certain permissions and disabled certain permissions based on the requirements in my organization. So that is how this works. So now we have understood that Zoho CRM comes with two default profiles, and if that is not good enough for you, you can clone from these and create a third profile. Another important point to note here is that the admin and the standard profile, that is these two default profiles, cannot be deleted from the system, and you cannot edit them extensively either. So if you go into the administrator profile, you are able to see that all permissions are enabled by default, and when you come into the setup permissions, it says that this is a system defined profile and you will not be able to modify permissions other than basic permissions and a few extension permissions. You can clone this profile or create a new one to manage other permissions. So this is the same for the standard profile as well. Right? This is locked. You cannot modify the setup permissions. So why is it that we don't allow you to edit setup permissions in admin and standard profile? You can only modify some basic module permissions. So this is because, let's say you go and modify a few setup permissions in your administrator profile. This is like pretty much like locking yourself out of the house and losing the key. You don't know where the key is and you're locked out. You don't know. In order to go and modify the profile, you need, say, user management permissions, but you have turned user management permissions off for yourself. Then how will you go and modify things? So this is like catch 22, right? So we don't want such situations. And another thing is that we want these two profiles to be like reference points for you for the future. Say you go and modify these two profiles and then you forgot how the system was when you first purchased it. So we don't want a scenario where you're struggling with it's like a factory reset thing. What were the original permissions? If you didn't know that, then it's going to be difficult to go back to the way things were on day one. So and this will also act as a sample profile for you when you're ultimately cloning this profile and creating multiple versions of your profiles for many users. So for all these reasons, we do not allow you to modify setup permissions in your administrator and standard profiles. And there is another reason why we have designed this to work like templates. So both profiles and roles work like templates, which means if you prepare one profile, you can possibly associate it to multiple users. So if there are many users in your company who are on the same rank or who have the same kind of responsibilities, a good example would be your sales team. You might have 25 sales reps with pretty much same level of permissions. In that case, you don't have to go and modify the permissions for 25 users separately, for each of their user accounts. You don't have to do that. All you have to do is create a single profile that holds good for all sales reps and simply associate all 25 to that one profile. So that even in the future, if there is a change in their responsibilities, if there is a change in the permissions awarded to them, then you can simply make the change in their single profile and that change will be reflected for all 25 of them in one shot. So that is the reason why we have designed this to be profile templates or role templates. So that's why we urge you to create these templates and make it ready so that once you onboard your users to your account, all you need to do is simply choose the profile and role that is suitable for each of those users. There could be 100 users, but if all 100 of them have similar permissions and similar responsibilities, then one profile should be enough for all of them. So this is how roles and profiles work in CRM. They are designed to be common templates to which you can map a bunch of users who have common roles and responsibilities in the organization. Okay, now let's look at how to create one such profile. In our example of Zilker Moments, we have 2 sales managers and 4 sales representatives. So by nature of their designation, there might be some permissions that need to be enabled for sales managers and disabled for sales managers, and similarly some permissions that we need to sort for sales representatives. So in this account, so I'm logged into the super admin account. So for Amelia Burrows, she's the super admin of this account, so automatically she has all the privileges in the system. So if you go to users, you see that Amelia Burrows is mapped to VP sales and the super admin, so all permissions enabled by default. Martha Hills is a sales manager and has a sales manager profile. That is because I have already created the sales manager's profile. Then we'll see Ned Schneebly, he's mapped to the sales rep services, so we created that, and is mapped to the administrator profile, but this is wrong. He should have a profile that says sales reps and has a limited set of permissions, because as a sales representative he cannot obviously have all the administrative privileges. So now let's look at what is different in the sales manager's profile that I have already created and how we can create a new sales reps profile. Okay, so now if I go into sales managers, what is the difference between admin standard and sales manager's profile? So let's say in the administrator profile, I am not able to modify the setup permissions. Let's say for this organization, the sales manager cannot create workflow rules. So basically the automation permission should be turned off. They cannot manage users, so user management permission has to be turned off, and a few compliance settings have to be turned off. If this is the requirement, I cannot go and modify this administrator profile to switch off user management. So by default in the administrator profile, the user management permission is turned on. I cannot switch this off. Similarly, in the standard profile, there are a bunch of things that I want to enable, say customization or automation, sandbox and so on, but these are all turned off. I cannot turn this on. So my only option is to create a third profile, customize my permissions, and then map the sales managers to that profile, which is what I have done here. So here in this particular profile, you will have all permissions except user management, automation, compliance, migration, and sandbox. If you go into this profile, scroll down, setup permissions are turned on, but user management and compliance is turned off. Automation is turned off, and migration from other systems is turned off. Sandbox is turned off. So we have basically nailed our requirement. So this is how you create profiles. You clone from administrator or standard profile or any other profile that is existing in your system and make further changes to it, save it, and then associate your users to this profile. So let's go and create a new profile for sales representatives. So I would say that it's better to clone this from sales managers, because already some permissions are restricted. So we need to restrict further permissions for sales reps profile. So we can clone from sales managers and call this sales representatives. So we can say that sales reps need to have setup permissions turned off, and they cannot export or share records, share data, basically create. So if this is our requirement, what would we do? Now we say that they are able to work with records, but they cannot export or share them, right? So these are all the module permissions. So we can basically leave this on. I'll come down to exporting permissions, turn this off. So export records is taken care of, and then they will not be able to share data. That's another requirement, right? So over and above the sales manager settings, where some setup permissions were turned off and so on, we have these restrictions also for the sales representatives. They cannot share or export records. And further to this, let's go and switch off the setup permissions. So this is easy, right? If they cannot perform any of the administrative tasks, then you can simply turn off the setup permissions. This is the master button for turning the setup permissions on or off. This way you will disable all the setup permissions. If not, you can switch this on and disable only the permissions that concern you, right? In our case, I'm going to turn this off completely, right? So we have now customized this profile for sales representatives. You don't have to save this exclusively. As you make edits, the profile gets saved automatically. Okay, so this is now auto saved. So let's go back, and you see now that our profiles are created. Sales managers was already in the system. We just cloned from sales managers and created a new profile called sales representatives. Now let's go back to our users and make sure they are mapped to their correct roles and profiles. So Martha Hill's profile and role was correct. For Ned Schneebly, who's a sales rep, so his role and profile has to be sorted. Role is already sorted. Profile, we just created this profile called sales representatives. So I will change this and save. Now Raghav Rao is already mapped to sales managers and sales manager profile and role. This is fine. Sharanya, who's a sales rep, is mapped to the administrator profile. So this is wrong. So we'll go and alter this as well. Changed to sales representative. Similarly, Susan Lawson, who is also a sales rep, needs to have a new profile. Edit. Change from administrator to sales representative. Save. Okay, now we will look at how this profile change reflects in all the user accounts. So right now I'm logged into Amelia Barroza's account. Let's switch to Martha Hill's account, who is a sales manager. So we said that sales managers will probably have all administrative functions except managing sandbox, compliance, settings, and user management, right? Let's test this out. I am now switching to the account of Martha Hills. Let's now go to the setup permissions and refresh the account. So we just changed the settings, so we need to refresh for the CRM account to pick up these changes. And now if I go into sandbox, which is under data administration, it says permission denied. You do not have sufficient permissions to perform this operation. So this works because we restricted sandbox permissions for the sales manager. Similarly, if you go and if Martha Hills tries to go and manage users, it will say you do not have sufficient permissions to perform this operation, right? So our sales manager settings works. Now let's go and check Susan Lawson's permissions. So over and above disabling setup permissions, we said that sales reps cannot export and share records, right? So this is sales reps account, that is Susan Lawson's account. Let's go and check if our permissions work. So there are a bunch of records, leads in Susan's ownership. Let's try to share this. Let's see if this person can share records. No. Usually share permission is enabled here. So even if you go into the record and try to share it, you will have a share permission. It is not available. On the contrary, just to give you some perspective, if you go to Martha Hill's records and try to share this, see, you see a share permission, right? This is because we have not done any change to the sharing privileges of sales managers, but a sales rep is not able to do that. So we are again into the Susan Lawson's account, and if I try to go into the options, I do not see a share button. So our profile permissions are working. Now if I try to go and export data, say leads, you do not have sufficient permissions to perform this operation, contact your administrator. All these sections under these profiles, these are mostly self-explanatory. Basic module permissions. This is with respect to whether somebody can see whether this affects the visibility of modules, and if someone can view, create, edit, or delete data. Whether somebody, first of all, has access to a particular module and what they can do with that module. View records, create records, edit, or delete. So, in case you have a requirement where someone can view records but not create, edit, or delete, you can switch those off. So, this way, this is also very detailed. So, you can analyze what a particular user can do based on their capabilities, and based on the requirements you can modify this profile. So this is with respect to module permissions, whether they can import or export data, send email to your contacts, that is individual emails, mass emails, whether they can delete email or perform mail merge operations, they can, whether they can perform mass updates, further module tools such as mass update, mass delete, change owner, and so on, and access the sheet view, print view, whether they can sort duplicates using find and merge, whether they can manage custom views and tags. So these are the several options or several operations that can be performed in Zoho CRM, and you need to analyze whether this particular user can perform this operation. If so, you can leave this intact. If not, you can just toggle this off, right? And you can sort this module wise. If they cannot access tags at all, switch this off. If they cannot access the tags of only certain modules, you can choose options respectively, right? And these are all to do with the setup permissions. Everything administrative is sorted under setup permissions here, and everything with respect to extensions, that is whether Zoho extensions or third-party extensions, this is nothing but integrations. So if you have Google accounts or Microsoft accounts and you are integrating those accounts with Zoho CRM, there is a sort of configuration that needs to be done, and whether or not a user can perform these configurations is what you decide here. Can they manage Zoho extensions? Can they manage Google extensions, Microsoft extensions, or whether they have developer access? So these are all built-in integrations and extensions we offer out of the box. But let's say we don't have a particular integration available out of the box. In such a case, our APIs are exposed, and with those APIs you can integrate with a third-party system if their APIs are also exposed, and you need developer skills to do this. And this is the section that you go to in order to award someone the developer access. And finally, social permissions, whether this person can integrate with your company's social media accounts and manage these settings. So you need to go section by section, understand what each piece of permission means. This is by far self-explanatory. And then once you decide to award someone the permission, you can toggle this on or toggle this off if they cannot perform this particular operation. All right. So that is how profiles and roles work in Zoho CRM. To summarize, roles decide your place in the organization hierarchy, and that in turn takes care of your data access privileges by default in the system. In short, your role determines what you can see in Zoho CRM, whether you can see your own records or access your peers or colleagues' records, right? And profiles indicate your CRM permissions, basically what you can do in the system, whether you can perform administrative functions, whether you can import, export records, view them, delete them, manage sandbox, manage customization, integrate with third-party accounts. So there are a zillion things you can perform in Zoho CRM, and your profile indicates what those permissions are. And it's recommended that you create these role and profile templates before you onboard users into the system, because it's going to be a lot easier to do so. For instance, if you go to users, let's say I invite a new user. Now let's say I create Ricky Thomas as another user. Now that my roles and profiles are already sorted, it's just easy for me to map the respective role and profile. Sales reps services, profile sales representatives. Done. Right? It's easy. Now I don't have to really break my head to sort Ricky Thomas's permission separately, because I have already created the role and profile template required. This is how roles and profiles work in Zoho CRM.